The Robert Spiers Benjamin Award, sponsored by Dee Dee Hunter in honor of her father, Lester Zifrin, for reporting on Latin America, and it goes to Simon Romero this year. The Brazil bureau chief with his own fan club for the New York Times for his rich and elegant writing about South America. And here's what the judges said about his work. His ability to weave cultural and political context into his reporting helps readers better appreciate the events he's covering. So here from his post in Rio is Simon Romero.
It is such an honor here to be here today in front of you all, to come here from Brazil. Thank you so much to the Overseas Press Club, especially to my editors on the international desk of the New York Times for their undying support. Joe Kahn, Michael Slackman, Lydia Polgreen, and especially my day-to-day editor, Greg Winter. Through thick and thin, he's always been there in support for what we do in Latin America and around the world. Latin America, as many of you know, sort of flies below the radar in terms of global events. A lot of the time, it doesn't compete with some of the bigger wars, some of the bigger conflicts, some of the bigger hunger stories around the world. But it's a region I've found over almost 2 decades of living and working in Latin America where things are actually getting better in many ways, and in that way, it's a thrilling place to report from and to live in. There are examples in Brazil, where I live, of income transfers to the poor, of economic advances that have been made over the last decade, and of course, the results are incredibly uneven and perhaps in question right now. But it's just a fascinating place to be. I would also, of course, like to thank my wife, who's here with us today. Ana Carolina, muito obrigado, meu amor. You know, I get to cover an incredible region in, based in Brazil for the Times, all of Brazil, of course, the Southern Cone, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Uruguay, which is one of my favorite places on earth because it's led by this guy called Pepe Mujica, who is he spent a decade and a half in prison, almost, much of that in isolation. He was a guerrilla. He paid for his actions as an urban guerrilla in Uruguay, and I had the joyful experience of interviewing him last year for the Times and writing a profile about him, and I interviewed him at his humble home in Montevideo on the outskirts, where he has a tractor where he farms chrysanthemums, of all things. And the interview started early in the morning, 8 a.m. He had 2 security guards, a total of 2. He lives down a dirt road on the outskirts of Montevideo. And he started out by making some mate for us, some tea, which he brewed himself, and we passed along the gourd back and forth throughout the interview. And it went on and on. It went hours. This interview was incredible. And then at the end of it, he pulled out a bottle of what they call in Uruguay espinillar, which is a sugarcane tipple, which is incredibly strong and potent. And then things really started to get going. Eventually, Pepe Mujica started to quote from Don Quixote. And he referred eloquently to this passage from Quixote about the pestilence of gallantry, where the errant knight runs into these goat herds in the middle of nowhere in Spain. And I'll never forget what Mujica said to me. He said that the goat herds were the poorest people in Spain, but probably they were also the richest. And it really taught me a lot about his worldview, about how the example that he's setting about the potential that Uruguay, and not only Uruguay, but other countries in the region have to teach the rest of us about life in general, about living. So thank you very much. I really appreciate this reward.
We wanted to mention that John Lee Anderson is here tonight receiving a citation for his reporting Slumlord. about Hugo Chavez's Bolivian Revolution in the New Yorker, and John Lee's here from his base in the UK tonight. I can't see a thing, so I'm sensing you're over here given the cheer. But maybe you're back here. Can't wait to see you at some point.